Today is Sunday, June 28th, 2026. Hey, beautiful people, and welcome back to For the Greater Good with Sunny Peoples. I am Sunny Peoples, and this is a space where we hold stories, not just as individual experiences, but as contributions to something larger, because our stories are not for us alone, they are for humanity. Today's theme comes out of a conversation I had with one of my mentees, Alexis, after the episode on Third Space. The theme is Selfie. The personal is a portal. A quick snapshot, a moment captured, a face turned slightly to the light. What if a selfie is more than that? What if it's not about vanity, but visibility? Not about ego, but existence? What if a selfie is a declaration? I am here and I choose how I am seen. Today we're exploring the selfie, from the images we take on our phones to the deeper question of the self, and how understanding ourselves become a way to connect with something greater than us. Think about the last selfie you took. Where were you? What made you decide this moment matters? Was it for memory, for connection, for validation? Or maybe you didn't think about it at all. In today's world, the selfie is everywhere. Front-facing cameras have turned us all into documentarians of our own lives. We angle, we filter, we crop. We choose what to include and what to leave out. And consciously or not, we begin to perform ourselves. There is a version of you that lives online, that gets likes, that becomes legible to others. But here's the question. Who is shaping that version of you? Is it you, your community, or the systems, the algorithm that rewards certain types of visibility over others? Because not all selfies are received equally. Some are celebrated, some are ignored, some are misunderstood. And for some people, being visible at all is already a kind of risk. Before we had cell phones in our hands, we had mirrors. And before mirrors, we had human impulse to see ourselves. Artists painted themselves. Photographers turned the lens inward. Writers described themselves into existence. The self-portrait has always been more than an image. It's a choice, a question, a negotiation between truth and expression. When you create a self-portrait, you're not just asking, what do I look like? You're asking, who am I? And how do I want to be known? And for many people, especially those whose stories have been erased, distorted, or ignored, self-portraiture becomes something powerful. It becomes agency, the ability to say, I will define myself, I will name myself, I will show up as I am. For marginalized communities, visibility has never been simple. For some, being seen, that meant being misrepresented, stereotyped, silenced, flattened into something incomplete. So when someone from those communities take a selfie or create a self-portrait, it's not always casual. Sometimes it's an act of resistance. Think about it for a moment. To exist in a world that tries to define you and still choose your own image, to say, this is how I see myself, this is how I want you to see me, that is power, that is reclamation, that is storytelling. Because sometimes the most radical thing you can do is show up as yourself, unfiltered, unedited, and undeniable. But let's go deeper. Because not every selfie has a lens. Not every self-portrait is visible. What does a selfie look like when no one is watching? What does it mean to reflect on who you are outside of performance, outside of expectation, outside of visibility? We spend so much time crafting how we appear, but how often do we sit with who we are? The inner self, the emotional self, the spiritual self doesn't always translate into an image. And yet, it may be the most important version of us. Here's where the idea of the selfie begins to expand. because the self is never just the self. We are shaped by our families, our histories, our communities, our cultures. Every piece of who we are is connected to someone or something beyond us. So when we take a selfie, we're not just capturing an individual, we're capturing a network of influence, memory, and belonging. What if we thought about identity that way? Not as something isolated, but as something relational. Who reflects you back to yourself? Who are the people who see you clearly, who affirm you, who challenge you, who help you to grow? Because sometimes we don't understand ourselves until we are in relationship with others. Community is a kind of mirror, not a perfect one, but a meaningful one. It shows us what we carry, what we share, what we contribute. So maybe a selfie isn't just about turning the camera inward. Maybe it's about recognizing that the self only becomes fully visible through connection. Let's stretch this even further. What if we thought about community storytelling as a kind of collective selfie? Each person brings a piece of truth, a perspective, a lived experience. And when those pieces come together, they form something bigger than any one individual, a portrait of who we are together. This is especially important when we think about the marginalized voices, because when those voices are missing, when our voices are missing, the picture is incomplete, distorted, untrue. And when people tell their own stories in their own words, on their own terms, we begin to see something fuller, something more honest, and something more human. This is where the work of storytelling and curation comes in. To curate is not just to select, it's to hold space, to make room, to listen with intention, to create environments where people can show up fully. Because not every story has been given this space, and not every voice has been invited into the frame. So when we curate, we are making choices about visibility, about memory, and what gets seen and what gets remembered. And when we center marginalized stories, we are not just amplifying voices, we are restoring balance to the narrative. So let's come back to where we started, the selfie. What does your selfie say about you? Not just the image, but the intention, the story, the context, the truth behind it. And maybe more importantly, who is your selfie for? Is it for approval, for connection, for documentation, for yourself? And what would change if we saw our reflections not just as something we own, but as something we offer? Our stories are not for us alone. They are for humanity. And the way we see ourselves, the way we choose to show up, becomes part of a larger shared narrative. So whether you pick up your phone or you sit quietly with yourself, remember, every act of self-seeing is also an act of meaning making. And every story you tell adds to the collective. This episode is in honor of those of us who have been misunderstood or maybe misled. Those of us who were called conceited or stuck up, when really we were just quiet, observant, reserved. Those of us who were ridiculed for being awkward, for taking our time, for processing the world in ways that didn't always fit the pace or expectations around us. This is for those of us who were discouraged from going inward, from deepening self-awareness, from exploring personal growth, from asking questions about who we are and what we need. And especially, this is for those of us who have been made to feel that protecting ourselves, setting boundaries, seeking clarity was somehow wrong, who were told that honoring ourselves was selfish, or even labeled as narcissistic, for choosing preservation over people-pleasing, Let me say this clearly. There is nothing wrong with knowing yourself. There is nothing wrong with protecting your peace. And there is nothing wrong with taking up space on your own terms. This conversation, this reflection, this reimagining of the selfie belongs to you too. In a universe this wide, this infinite, this full of mystery, in a world that doesn't center us, the most grounded thing we can do is reflect on who we are and why we are here. This has been For the Greater Good with Sunny Peoples. Take care of yourself and take care of each other. See you next time.